verbal abuse, brutality, and misuse of firearms. What causes officer burnout? Why are policemen more severely affected than other professions? And what, if any, are the solutions?
The fact that the officer has such authority and power over the lives of others, that's a weighty responsibility. He's also obviously in a dangerous job, a job where he could get hurt, a job where he could get killed. He's in a job that involves an extreme swing of emotions, from boredom on the one hand for long periods of time to moments of high excitement where he's got to react immediately under stress.
It naturally contributes to the stress factor because you don't know from one minute to the next what you're going to face. You don't know if you're going to face 8 hours of boredom or 8 hours of shootouts. You just don't know.
You can't go around thinking that this may be the last call you're going to make. You may get shot this time. You just have to be ready for it. They try to train us, and we try to listen to what they have to say, and you have to prepare yourself mentally and physically for it.
You consider yourself responsible for so many people's lives. You consider yourself responsible for the effect you have on somebody's life. The decision you make when you handle a call could have a far-reaching effect on somebody. It could be years down the road before that particular decision, the repercussions from it finally come to rest.
Are you expected to be all things to all people? And is that possible?
Too many police officers try to be everything to everybody. And when they fail in that, they feel like they fail as a police officer. Instead of doing the best they can and looking at the job and saying, I did a good job today. I didn't do 100, but I give myself a B+ or an A- or whatever, and being happy with that. And that's what brings on part of the depression, the inability to solve the problems of the world, and until you realize you're not going to do it by yourself, then that's right, you're going to be depressed about it.
When you're under a great deal of stress, one way of handling it is simply to remove yourself from interactions with other people. It could be also that the officer's depressed, and one of the major symptoms of depression is withdrawal from interpersonal contacts.
At one point in time, the afternoon shift at a particular precinct had something like a 60 or 70% number of officers that were either divorced or in the process of getting a divorce. And I think probably if you look at all the middle shifts and sometimes the midnight shifts, that type of work puts a tremendous amount of pressure on an officer and his family. And I think that burden sometimes can't be borne by just one person. If you don't have, the husband and wife both really working hard to keep the marriage going, it's going to break.
What experiences have you had there, Larry, in terms of marital problems?
I've been through a divorce, and I think some of it was caused by the police department. The shifts we work, and her family just doesn't realize that I have to work on weekends and holidays. They're just not willing to accept it. And the whole time I was married to her, her family never did realize that I had to work the holidays. No, I couldn't be off with them. And one day I came home and she was gone.
Shift work, and correct me if you think differently, but shift work on the police department is totally different than shift work in any other kind of a job. It's not like working at a factory where you come in and do essentially the same job that the day shift man did. Each shift in the police work has completely different characteristics. All three of them are just totally, distinctly different. And the afternoon shift is a shift that starts out busy and gets worse. I mean, that's when everybody's getting off work. That's when the happy hours are. And if you work 4 to midnight, you're going to start out with some calls that are going to be held over from the day shift. And before you get off, you're going to be locking up drunks and people having fights, and you're going to be making all these family disturbance calls. And when you get through, you're not just ready to get off and go home and go to bed, which the same thing applies with the midnight officers. Yeah, your system is not set up to take that kind of shock and stress and then just go home and take a bath and get in bed and go to sleep. And there's something that has to wind you down, whether you make that drinking, which causes a lot of problems, or whether you make it some form of exercise or other thing to relieve your tension. You've got to do something to relieve it because it's going to be there.
When you get off work, you want to relax, but you're so keyed up that it takes you a while. So naturally, a lot of people are going to resort to different mechanisms to do that. Alcohol, just whatever.
Most of the ones that I've seen who have had outside affairs, their problems at home. The ones that are happy at home and have no or little problems is very rare.
I think that's a personal thing, you know, that each officer has to deal with, and some handle it better than others. I really don't know how to address that other than to say that it's kind of like drinking. It's something that you have to deal with on a personal basis, on a personal level, and you know, you have to decide within yourself, well, I'm going to act this way, and I'm going to do it this way because this is what I believe, you know.
In addition to dealing with sudden danger, the public's expectations, and alcohol and marital problems which police work can bring, the judicial system and the police infrastructure present another group of frustrations for some officers.
And I think probably if you look at how many appeals and how many continuances and how many of everything else, the complexities that the court system have burdened the police officer with, I think you see that frustration coming in earlier. I think when you see an officer that goes out, detectives as well as uniform officers, they go out and make what at the time they thought was a good legal arrest, and then 3 years from then the Supreme Court says, well, we've changed the rules, you know, instead of 9 innings we're only playing 8 this year, and they throw the case out. Yeah, that frustration comes in, and you keep battering. It's like batting your head against a wall, and you keep making arrests, and you see these different things happening this warning and that warning, and then you got to the point where you're afraid to let somebody confess to you because you're afraid they'll throw it out, and you don't want to mess the case up. And in addition to officers suffering from it, society as a whole is suffering from it because, you know, at least we're under a policy we're supposed to have guns 24 hours a day. The average citizen isn't. And they're putting these criminals back on the street and releasing murders on technicalities to be back in society, to prey on society again. And society is the one that's suffering the most, even though we do have problems with it.
The court system deals on technicalities. They deal on words. I've even seen a point to where if a certain paper wasn't brought to a certain court at a specific time, that this person can be dismissed until the paper comes, and then they'll send a car out to rearrest him. This is frustrating for us because we know the criminals out in the field and we have to deal with them. We know their capabilities and what they do, and I'm sure it's aggravating for the citizen who has been victimized by these people. And I feel like the citizens of the city are the ones that really take the hardcore from what the court system decides, because they're the ones that's been deprived, they've been victimized, and their time has been lost because of this criminal, what he's done, if he's broken into their house, if he's raped their daughter, or what have you. And the court is looking at a piece of paper and the laws that has been made, you know, before us.
I think I can offer a for instance in that respect. Some years back, I don't remember how many, 3, 4, or 5, I caught a burglar inside a grocery store, and caught him red-handed, you might say. And we finished all of our investigation and took him downtown, and then of course we went through the long, arduous process of writing all the reports. And before I got off work that night, I found out that he had been released from jail on his own recognizance. And I checked his rap sheet and found out that he had already had a felony conviction on his record, on top of the fact that we caught him inside the building. So there's no doubt about the fact that that's frustrating, to have a case that you feel like is airtight, and then this person that's responsible for the offense is turned loose without even having to post a bond. I believe the reason given was that the jail was overcrowded. Well, of course, we've had overcrowded jails for years, and it's just a problem we have to deal with. I'm not sure that's the right way to do it. I know that approach is frustrating to us.
People made more aware of how these people are back on the streets more readily than we can arrest them. And we're going to have a lot of problems because we've got to make snap judgments right there on the scene and then held accountable for them 6 and 12 months later. And a lawyer can go over our reports and over the rest of the officers who investigate these reports, and they can find a technicality to free their person they're representing, and they'll be gone. And we've got to make these snap decisions, and we don't get the second chance, and they do.
Do you feel like there is a lot of nepotism or favoritism within the department?
As far as the Memphis Police Department has to do with it, because there's no chance, like we were talking earlier, there's 30 people on my shift, and there's probably 10 or 15 that's got seniority on me, so there's a lot of men waiting to get promoted, and they'll know how good a job they do. They're wasting their time, because no matter if they make good on their evaluation, and if they do a good job, unless they know somebody, you're not going to get promoted.
I've worked part-time jobs, and I've compared them to the police department. The police department has a lot of politics involved, and there's going to always be favoritism, and it's no different working on the police department with the favoritism as it is working for Federal Express or any other job. I think favoritism going to always be on any job to a certain degree.
Unquestionably, there's some. It's something that I think will always be there, and I haven't yet seen an ideal situation where it was totally eliminated, and I don't think you'd find that in any city. But we're trying. The police association is trying, I know. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what most of the men want to see is a totally objective promotional system. And again, I'm not sure we can reach that goal, but we're going to keep trying.
First of all, I would say if they think that favoritism is rampant now, they should have been here 6 or 8 years ago. But I would put our method of performance evaluation, our method of promotion or advancement in this department, I think that if you interview those people who know anything about it whatsoever, they will tell you that it is beyond reproach. I have bent over backwards to make that thing as fair as possible. Now, I think that there's no question that the equal opportunity mandates, which are imposed on us by the Justice Department, these type things, do frustrate some people. And they feel that we bring people up because of race or gender that are, perhaps under them. In terms of what's been known as the fair-haired boy syndrome, and I'm sure that's what you've been hearing, if by that they mean that we're promoting people who do a good job, who are responsive, who go out of their way to be the very best police officer possible, if that's a fair-haired boy, yeah, they can book. That guy's going to get promoted every time. If, on the other hand, they mean what once existed, whether you fish with the captain or paint the chief's house or whatever, no. And that doesn't go on, and I defy anyone to find a case of that. I truly believe in the past, as a community, as a society, we have allowed officers to feel sorry for themselves. We have allowed them to get hung up into the difficult, dangerous job syndrome. Yes, it is a difficult job. Yes, it is a dangerous job. The truth is that being a fireman is more dangerous if you want to take deaths, and being a convenience store clerk is much more dangerous if you want to take deaths. No taking away, though, that being a police officer is difficult and dangerous. It's frustrating. Society sometimes doesn't seem to be able to make its mind up what it wants. But nothing is more destructive to pride than self-pity. The two just cannot go together. They are not synonymous. And so therefore, my general attitude with my officers is that I expect a good job out of them, that we'll do everything we can to make that a productive job, one in which they can be proud. And I might interject here, this is why it's so absolutely essential to get rid of those officers who do not do the right things, who do things that are wrong, the rotten apple and the barrel syndrome. But in terms of allowing them to feel sorry for themselves, I think that's a terrible mistake. We should expect them to do a good job. And if they're not of a caliber that's up to a difficult and dangerous job, then they need to be delivering bread or waiting on a counter or something like that. And I don't mean to take from the difficulty of the danger of the job, only to say that the vast majority of officers in this department are proud of what they do. And I think that the single thing that will overcome this burnout syndrome, this frustration syndrome, the best and the fastest is an injection of that pride, the knowledge that you have done something difficult and you have overcome it. You have performed an absolutely vital and essential service to this community over great odds. I think that there is no question there's a stagnation at the lower level. And this is why I think this career development wherein a man could advance in pay without advancing in rank, I think that would be a marvelous boost in terms of morale. I'll tell you another issue that I think has been devastating to morale on this department, and that's fixed shifts. I think that the issue of rotating shifts would add a great deal, not only in terms of the burnout syndrome, but in terms of the service this department is able to render the community. But unfortunately, we have allowed ourselves to get into the syndrome where our pay must be supplemented by pay at a second job, and we've encouraged people to get into educational programs which preclude, possibly at this point, the rotating shift. I wish we were able to pay them enough so that second jobs would be out of the question.
With police burnout now beginning at 3 to 5 years instead of the 7 to 10 year period of only 5 years ago, police officers have become an indicator of the levels of stress in today's society. The extent to which we can afford to solve dedicated officers' problems through increased counseling and higher pay could rest on our economic capacity to improve society as a whole.